Hey everyone, welcome in to another daily editorial here on the KE Report. Corey and Chad here, getting an update from Skeena Resources. This is a special video update as Paul Geddes, the person we're talking to, Skeena's Vice President of Exploration and Resource Development. He has put together a few slides to walk us through the most recent news out of the company, announced June 20th. The company has updated the resource estimate for the Eskay Creek project, now coming in at 5.9 million ounces gold equivalent in the measured and indicated categories. Now, Paul, I know you'll walk us through more or less some of the changes that happened to the resource, as well as some exploration that the company is going to undertake this year. But I guess just as a broad comment, the recent drilling and this updated resource, it is filtering into a feasibility study, but the focus here was really to, it seems like, upgrade a lot of the ounces into measured and indicated. That's where most of these ounces are, moved up some ounces from the inferred category. Is that fair to say, Paul, that you're really just working on isolating these ounces, moving them into a more reasonable, more reliable measurement here?
Hi, Corey. Again, thanks for having me. And yeah, no, that's a very fair assessment of what we've done. We pulled a lot of levers here. This wasn't just simply a matter of performing organic growth in the resource with the 22 drilling, but also revisiting our methodologies on how we calculated the resource. Resource calculation tends to be a bit of a dark art, black box science. And when you're done with your resources, you're always like, oh, well, we should have done this, or we should have done this. And I'll talk about all that in the next few slides here, just to add some color to it. But, maybe to talk about before we actually get into the actual resource table itself, what we did is we added 278 drill holes to this mineral resource estimate. And it was a combination of exploration and infill. So it's not as though all 278 drill holes actually added to the ounce count growth, because we had to cast our lines out. We had to go and see if there was something there, and then if we, for lack of a better descriptor, drilled a dud, we would move on to something else. But if we did get into something, then we would start hammering it and getting closer space drilling to increase it. And examples of this would be the 23 zone, which we discovered a few years ago. The other thing that changed in this resource was updated metallurgical process recoveries. So right now, as it stands, and we'll talk about this and I'll show you the effects, is an 84% gold recovery and an 88% silver recovery. Now, why did that change? Okay, because originally, when we were doing our resource updates, we had to utilize what was historically reconciled. Now, the mill, when it was in production, was getting 90% gold and 80% silver. So those are the numbers that we were using. However, through a lot of the studies we've performed over the last 2 years, our most recent, and again, this is a snapshot in time with the studies, is 84% gold and 88% silver. So now that will have a little bit of an effect on how we reported the resources. And again, I'll show you visually how that changed. The other big factor is a new block size, and this was to better reflect the contemplated more selective mining method. So originally what we had used was a 10 by 10 by 5 meter high block size, fairly large. And Randy Reichert, our new president and CEO, is like, no. The way we should be doing this is mining in what we call flitches. So you would hick up a bench on 10 meters, and then you would dig 3 meters away, get more selective, dig the next 3 meters away, and then finally dig the next 3 meters away. So again, more selectivity and better grade control. So that's why we adjusted this to better fit what the engineering will be when we move on to the DFS. And then most importantly is this improved reconciliation to the historical production. The best way to determine whether or not your black box resource estimate is actually in effect reality is to compare against what was historically mined and what they reconciled. So as it stands right now, things were good in the historical estimates. We were probably a little bit more conservative than we should have been. But this one is now much, much better. And again, if you can say that, the methodologies that you applied more closely give you the same answer as to what they mined historically, then it's more credence to the methodologies that you used in your estimate. Okay, so the resource statement itself, again, we'll just go to the highlights on this, but the total measured and indicated is what we really want to look at. We're not as concerned about the inferred. So as it stands right now, we're at about 52 million tons, and this is combined open pit and underground. The average gold equivalent grade is 3.5 grams per ton, so it didn't really move that much, okay? And the gold equivalent ounces are now 5.9 million ounces, up from the 5.1 originally. Now, if we strip away the underground, which is about 353,000 ounces, basically just the remnants of what was left over after we, modeled the pit, the open pit itself right now contains 5.6 million ounces in the measured and the indicated categories. Now, keep in mind that this pit is not going to be the final pit that gets utilized for any engineering study. These pits are used to determine what has reasonable prospects of ultimate economic extraction, right? So it's like, what do you consider reasonable to put out as a resource statement? So there will be a conversion factor. And as an example, in the 2022 resource, when we went to the feasibility study, it was roughly about a 75% conversion rate.
Paul, just a quick question
Okay,
here.
and then if we just do a quick comparison, up top, what we see here is the current resource for the pit. Okay, so again, that 50 million tons, 5.6 million ounces gold equivalent. Okay, but let's do a comparison to the 2022 model. So as it stands right now, our measured and indicated tonnage went up 8%. So we added more volume. And a lot of this could be attributed to what we did in the southern portions of the deposit, like expanding the 23 zone and that area, okay? We did take a little bit of a haircut in the gold grade. It went down about 1%, but that makes sense because, again, we were drilling that, rhyolite hosted mineralization in the 23 zone, which doesn't necessarily always have the same tenor and grade as what you would get in the contact mudstone. So that's okay. That works out with the reconciliation. Same thing with, again, the gold itself. Silver came up a little bit, but net, what happened was we're now able to report roughly an 8% increase in our gold equivalent ounces. Now, when we went to constrain this open pit, we kept everything the same as 2022. The pit wall angles were 45 degrees, the G&A costs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, again, the only change that we made was just a difference in the process recoveries. And what I'll do is I'll take us into a section which will show the effects of those process recoveries. So here again is just an oblique 3D view. This is the brand new pit. This is all of the reported resources in the gold color at a 0.7 gram per ton gold equivalent cutoff. You can see there's some satellite pits that have now evolved from some of our 23 zone drilling and just exploratory drilling, really. 22 zone really didn't change that much, but we did see an expansion in the 23, and I'll show you that here in a second. So this one's right through the center of the deposit. You can see here the white line represents the 2022 open pit. That again, this is the resource pit. You can see larger block sizes because it's more jagged relative to this orange line, which is a little bit harder to see. So I'll just emphasize that. Now, what happened here is, again, all the factors for determining the resource basically stayed the same, and also for the open pit. However, just a change in the process recoveries. So again, we dropped that gold percentage, increased the silver percentage. And then what happened was we took a little bit of a haircut. This mineralization sitting here at the bottom of the original 2022 resource pit didn't get included in the 2023 pit. Okay, and that makes sense because all of this material sitting in between the two is just literally barren waste. Okay, so making that adjustment in the recoveries basically indicated that it wasn't worth it for us to be going down here and grabbing that mineralization, which only probably runs 1.5 to maybe 2 grams, as opposed to everything up top, which is running, close to 3.5, 4 grams per ton.
So that stuff isn't even worth going deeper in underground mining then, is it, Paul?
Probably not. If you adjust the cutoff grade down in the lower mudstone area, yes, you can get higher grade portions, but they're going to be smaller, right? And those would have been included in what we're reporting as underground resources, right? And they have to demonstrate some degree of continuity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, for them to be reported.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so that was section 102.75, which we just looked at. And now let's do a comparison and take a look at section 9900, which cuts through the 23 zone and the 21A West. So again, the surface is on top. We can see all the mineralization in the gold. The white jagged line is the original 2022 pit, okay? And then just to emphasize, I'll put in the new 2023 pit. So you can see that all of this new mineralization that we uncovered in the 23 zone has now been incorporated into it. So this is an area that contributed to that 8% growth, not only in tonnage, but also in relative gold equivalent ounces. Okay. Now, I would also speculate at this point in the game that once we do an engineered pit for this, for the DFS, that yes, this mineralization will get incorporated into the mine plan. And, you know, again, I'm being a little forward looking here, potentially increase the mine life. And that was our mandate from day one. You know, we had a 9-year mine life based on the feasibility study. We wanted to push that further out into the future. And, you know, exploration did their job and increased the resource. What's also nice is this over here. This is the 21A West zone. So if you think back to what we talked about in previous engagements, this was all waste. There was no mineralization sitting here. Now, what we've done is we've obviously gone down and, you know, shot the fish in the barrel with the drill holes and populated this. And now we've basically, you know, done geological alchemy and turned waste into ore. And that's how it's sitting now. So there's also a contribution for the 8% growth in tons, as well as gold equivalent ounces.
Now, Paul, just a little bit more color between this 21A and 21-3 zone. Did you say you could bring in some mineralization there, or is this just simply going to be more or less kind of waste, or do you need to drill more in between this?
No, this is largely all in the measured and the indicated category within the 23 zone. Basically, just for different geological reasons, this area is barren. There's nothing that's sitting out here. We've already drilled it and sanitized it, so that will be waste.
Okay, no problem. Just wanted to ask that. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so that's essentially our resource and how and why we arrived at it, and you know, all the various different levers that we pulled. What I also want to do is just remind everybody that, you know, the story's not over here. You know, there's, you know, close to 6 million ounces sitting right over here in the main open pit, but there's still that underground component, right? Basically, last year we had that intersection with hole 1081, and that was close to 34 meters of almost 4 grams per ton. And you're like, well, okay, Paul, that's great, but look, there's all these historical drill holes that were down here, and you know, you don't have a lot of room to maneuver. But the most important thing to take home here is that a lot of those drill holes either never made it down to the contact mudstone for various drilling reasons, it was just bad ground conditions, or when they intersected the contact mudstone, they sampled it and stopped the drill hole, and they weren't looking at anything underneath it. And that's sort of what happened in 1081 as well. We hit 1 meter of contact mudstone that, yeah, it was barren. It didn't have anything in it. But then right below that, again, the 34 meters of 4 grams a ton, or sorry, 32 meters of 4 grams a ton. Now, what does that mean? Okay, well, that gold can't be sitting there without it having been, you know, brought to the surface in the contact mudstone somewhere. So ultimately, what we're going to do is follow up on that with a series of wedge drill holes. So as an example, this is hole 1081 sitting over here on the far right, and then we'll branch off. And, you know, instead of drilling these are very, very expensive drill holes. We don't want to just keep drilling, you know, masters all the way down. So to get around that is what we'll do is we'll wedge off and branch and get a spread. Now, what we've also learned from, you know, obviously the last 5 years worth of work at Eskay Creek is that we know if we hit something in the rhyolites, just like hole 1081, we're probably within about 15 meters of a vent and like a super high grade contact mudstone, which is what we're after. Now, we'll start off on 1081 and branch off. And then because we've done some structural analysis, taking a look at the magnetics data, doing compilations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we've got a very good indication that we should be seeing something further down deep and off to the northwest. And that's what we're doing here. So what the plan will be is we'll drill, do the parents, see what we get into close to 1081. We'll move on. We'll step out on aggressive spacings because we're looking for basically Eskay Creek version 2. And then we'll spread our wings around it and continue doing that all the way down.
So because these will be deeper holes and you are, again, just spreading off of deeper holes, how important is width going to be? Obviously, grade is very important, but width, making it economic, how important is that going to be to see down there?
I always like to see what I call a grade width of 30. So if your width is, say, 3 meters, okay, you would need a grade of 10 grams per ton. So anything with a grade width higher than 30, in my mind, is going to cut it down there. That's not going to be a problem. Now, keep in mind, Eskay Creek, the underground, like if you hit contact mudstone that's mineralized, that stuff's going to run an ounce over at least 3 meters. So this could be a game changer down here, you know, when and if we hit.
Okay. When are you going to start drilling down there?
In about 8 days from now.
Ooh, all right. How quickly are you going to be able to drill down and then wedge off those holes?
It actually won't take too long. The ground conditions and obviously the drilling technology in the last 20 years has developed. So we haven't had any problems getting down there. And then the wedging itself, it's a little time consuming to set the wedge because you want to put it in exactly the right direction. But once you get a routine going, it doesn't take long at all. So getting 30, 40, 50 meters a day is not unheard of.
Oh, okay.
It'd be quick.
And this is going to be the focus for this year's program. Are you going to be able to put some sort of a resource around it, or is this year really just getting an understanding, getting a feeling for if it's worth continuing to explore down here?
I think the latter is the safer way to think about this at this point in the game, right? Because the first thing is we don't know obviously whether or not we're going to hit, right? So we're going to get the holes down there. We're going to assess. Obviously, you know, that drill hole is only 2.5 inches wide, so you're getting a very small relative sort of representation of what's going on around you, and that's why we want to branch off around it, right? Now, the other thing too is visually, if we hit mineralized contact mudstone, it's pretty obvious. We'll be able to tell. Obviously, we'll assay it before we make a decision on the next hole, but also to sort of satiate our curiosity and make sure that we're not missing something. We'll definitely put at least 1 or 2 branches or wedge holes off of our original, even if it doesn't look like it hit something. So yes, the answer is we're going fishing. We're going to see where the fish are or they aren't. And hopefully if we, you know, do get into them, that's again going to be a pretty momentous game changer for the company.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks for explaining that, Paul.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so maybe just to summarize, you know, for 2023, the exploration program, we're obviously going to focus on Eskay Deeps, hopefully trying to find Eskay, you know, version 2.0. And the other thing too is near mine extension exploration drilling. So even though we put those 270 odd drill holes into the area surrounding the main mine, we also left ourselves some low hanging fruit. We had new intersections that we didn't get a chance to follow up on. One drill hole in a resource doesn't qualify even for inferred. So you need to follow up and add confidence to it by at least having others surrounding it. And then finally, one of the things we don't really emphasize is our regional grassroots program for the formerly, the inherited Questex properties. And that's going to be the KSP, the Kingpin, as well as Tammy, et cetera, in this area. So this is going to be quite exciting. We've got a $3 million program that's going to be working in this, well, essentially virginal area of the Golden Triangle. And our targets are going to be basically copper porphyries and VMSs, just like Eskay Creek.
Now, how many different targets are you going to be drilling at KSP or Kingpin?
Well, first stage is to get in there and get more data. So it's going to be, again, grassroots. So it'll be boots on the ground, taking samples, soils, running some geophysics, as well as stream sediment sampling. Then once we can pigeonhole into, smaller areas that have higher prospectivity, we'll go and revisit those once we have the data. And then if we see something we like, hopefully we can get in there and possibly do some drilling this year.
Okay. So that's really, yeah, as you say, regional grassroots exploration. This is early stage, but different angle for the company as well.
Exactly. And then finally, the definitive feasibility study, which is going to come out, I think it's slated for Q4 of this year. And again, that will be informed by the new resource that we just put out.
Now, do you have any insights on turnaround time for the drilling that will happen this year, even the turnaround time for some of the grassroots exploration on these other projects?
Well, there's two things that are going to happen. So it's at Eskay Creek, a lot of the mineralization is very cryptic. You can't honestly just look at it and say, oh my God, well, that runs 5 grams a ton. Oh, that runs nothing. Oh, that runs 30 grams a ton. So as it stands right now, we're actually going to be getting an ultimately accredited lab on site at Eskay Creek. Now, what does that mean for us? We'll be able to put our samples into this lab, give ourselves a yes or a no answer to move on and make decisions. Now, we're not going to publicly report those analyses, right? Because it's not accredited yet. But what we'll do is we'll send the samples off to ALS as we always do, and then obviously report accordingly. But it'll help us in our decision-making process so that we can expedite things as opposed to waiting for a few weeks, from the various private labs. Now, with respect to turnaround time on the actual labs, it's anybody's guess, right? If you've got a busy summer field season and everybody's doing huge drill programs, then obviously you flood the labs, the turnaround time increases. Or if it's slow or you get in there early, like we're going to be doing, we should expect better turnaround times, 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
But it'll change.
Mm-hmm. Well, fair enough. Okay.
Yeah. So that's essentially the update on the resource, and then also what we're doing this summer. Did you have any questions at all, Corey?
I think that pretty much wraps us up. Essentially, you are, again, looking to add mine life to the feasibility study and the study that came out earlier, but you have some other exploration doing. And it sounds like a lot of the exploration this year is more true exploration, right? Down at the deeps, you don't really know what you're going to hit there. How much could the deep area move the needle then for the underlying resource or even for the economics? I know it's early on, but what could be possible down there?
Well, if it works out the way we think it's going to work out, here's the footprint of Eskay Creek as it stands right now. So that's the center of, the rift and the contact mudstone. And that was a ridiculously high grade quantity of gold and silver that was historically mined. Now, keep in mind, if we're down in Eskay Deeps, this is not a pittable target. We're not looking for 4 gram material. We're looking for that 10 gram per ton plus. If we intersect down there, we're going to hit mineralization that's the same beast as the original. The sky's the limit on this one. Again, okay. if we hit, so seeing numbers in the realm of, 3 meters or plus of 15 to 30 grams per ton gold equivalent is not unheard of. That's what we're expecting.
Okay. Yeah, Paul, I think that pretty much covers it. You've walked us through that resource and the exploration ongoing for this year. If anybody has any follow-up questions, wants Paul or anybody else on the team at Skeena Resources to answer them, please email me, fleck@kereport.com. I'll get those addressed for you and also follow up with the team as we get some more news out of the company. So, Paul, again, thank you very much for putting together these slides, and thanks for the update on the back of that updated resource.
Thanks so much for having us, Corey.